In Chapter 3, we're going to look at the skills approach to leadership. This is a little bit different than the trait approach to leadership. So let's look at, first of all, what do we mean by the skills approach? Let's start by defining leadership skills. These are learned abilities used to accomplish a set of goals and objectives. So the key here is this idea that they're learned abilities. They're not something that's innate to us. They're not something that's unchangeable. So when we use the skills approach to leadership, we've got what's known as a leader-centered perspective, just like the trait approach. We're only looking at the leader. We're not looking at the follower. But instead of looking at traits, we're putting an emphasis on characteristics that can be learned and developed in the leader. We're not looking at the personality of the leader, or we're not looking at their abilities due to their genetic makeup or things like that. We're looking at the skills that they have learned. And so that's what makes this different than the trait approach to leadership. Now, this chapter basically presents two versions of the skills approach. There's the three-skill approach of Katz, which is an older, simpler approach, and then the skills model by Mumford and others, which is a lot more complete and a lot more complex. Now, it just kind of helps you with this chapter, realizing we've got these two theories that we're going to be looking at, fairly independent of each other. So let's start off with the three-skilled approach, the three basic leadership skills that are necessary according to Katz. And here we've got this figure, and we've got three layers of leadership. Down here we've got supervisory management. So let's suppose that we're talking about a pizza making company. The supervisory management is maybe like the guy who supervises one of the pizza making stores the mornings Monday through Friday, and he's got 4 people that works for him. The middle management, a little higher, would be the guy who runs the entire store. Perhaps he owns the franchise, and he has like 3 or 4 supervisor managers who work for him. And then the top management would be the people that run the company, that are responsible for the entire franchise. Maybe 10 stores, maybe 100 stores, maybe 1,000 stores. Now, what Katz says is that skills are needed, but that different levels of skills are needed depending on where you are in what type of management you're doing. So down at the supervisory management, where you've got the guy who's supervising 4 guys working at the restaurant, the categories are the skills are technical skills. That means how to make the pizzas, how to do minor repairs in the building when things go wrong, how to fix the pizza oven when it breaks down. So there's got to be technical skills to lead there. The supervisory management also needs to have human skills, and that means how do you work with people? How do you manage people? How do you motivate them? How do you create an atmosphere so that they want to stay and want to work hard and committed to the organization and have good relationships with them? And then finally, there's conceptual skills, and this is looking at the big picture of how the organization works. Both the store, what does the store need to do to make money and stay in business, but how does the whole franchise and the whole company fit together? Now, on this lower level supervisory management, the most important skills to have developed are the technical skills and the human skills. The conceptual skills, you're just supervising 4 guys Monday through Friday in the mornings and afternoons. You don't necessarily have to have a mastery of the big picture of what's happening in the company. So on this lower level of management, the leadership skills are especially technical and human that are necessary, but it's still really good to have some conceptual skills. Now, in contrast, the top management, They need some technical skills. They should know how pizzas are made, but they don't need to necessarily know how to repair the ovens or details or other technical things that are that they wouldn't be exposed to in corporate headquarters. So they need some technical knowledge. They need lots of human skills, and they also need conceptual skills to understand what's the big picture happening with the organization. How should the company evolve? What are the environmental factors going on that should and how should they respond to them? And then in between, you have the middle management. This might be the store owner or someone who manages a couple stores, and they need all types of skills. They need the technical skills to know everything that's happening on the ground. They need the human skills to work with the people they're supervising, and they need the conceptual skills to understand the business. So this is what's called the three basic leadership skills model of Katz, or sometimes it's called administrative skills or management skills, because back in the 1950s, the topic of leadership wasn't really in style. They talked about administration or management. So leaders need all three skills, but the relative importance of each of the skills changes based on the level of management. So that's the first aspect, the first skills approach. Now let's look at a skills approach that's a little bit more complex, and this one's a little tricky, so we're going to look at it gradually. So this skills model of leadership was developed by Mumford and Zaccaro and a few others in the year 2000. And the goal is to identify the factors that maximize a leader's performance, especially in problem solving. So here we're focusing on how well do leaders do? How well do they perform? How many pizzas do they sell at their place? How well can they figure out the next step in their business plan? So this is focused on productivity in general, but especially on problem solving has been the focus of much of the research here. So it emphasizes the capabilities that make effective leadership possible rather than what specifically leaders do. What are leaders capable of? What have they learned how to do, not necessarily what they actually do. So this is a capability model which suggests the idea that, whoa, if you develop these capabilities, you can be a leader. So this is a very different than the trait model that says if you have these traits, it's more likely that you'll be a leader. It's if you develop these skills, these capabilities, you'll be more likely to be a good leader. So what are these, what is this skills model? There's 5 elements, 5 components to the skills model. So let's start off with looking at the first three components here. So we talked about the outcomes. That's what we want leaders to accomplish. That would be effective problem solving. That would be performance. That would be everything that's involved in getting people to work towards that common goal. It's accomplishing that goal. So the skills model is interested in performance, getting the things done, achieving those goals. And the skills model says that what's necessary to get those outcomes are competencies. And so competencies is another word for skills here. And you need to have problem-solving skills. You know how to solve problems. You need social judgment skills, which is the idea of you need to know how to work with people. And then you have to have knowledge to solve what's going on, to look at what's going on and then solve the problems based on with the techniques that you have. Now it's just, this theory doesn't just say, competencies lead to outcomes. It recognizes that individual attributes or traits, like we studied about in chapter 2, are important. So these individual traits, these attributes, influence the competencies that people have. So some of the attributes are like general cognitive ability. That's kind of like how smart you are, how well you can learn. That will certainly influence your problem-solving skills. Do you learn from past experiences? Those past experiences are often described as or called crystallized cognitive ability. Crystallized means that, aha, you've learned this, it's inside of your mind. It's kind of like what we're trying to do in school. We're trying to give you information that will stay in your mind so that when you come up with some problem, you can apply your problem-solving skills using the knowledge that you have, the crystallized knowledge, the crystallized cognitive ability. Other individualized individual attributes, other traits that are important, are motivated. Are people motivated to learn how to solve problems? Are they motivated to work with people? Are they motivated to make the company succeed? And then personality traits, which we talked quite a bit about, and how they, some personality traits make people more perceived to be leaders and make it easier to influence people. So we start off with these first three components of the skill models: the individual attributes or traits. We've got competencies, which are skills that can be learned. And then we've got the leadership outcomes, which measures, is leadership really being exerted? Now, let's look at the complete model. So what we've done is we've got the three parts we just looked at: the individual attributes and traits, the competencies and skills, and the leadership outcomes. And we say these are influenced by career experiences and environmental influences. Now, what do career experiences mean? That means the work that you've already done. And that work that you've already done has been influences your motivation, it influences your behavioral tendencies, it basically teaches you and makes you who you are. But it also gives you experience so that, aha, I know how to solve this type of problem because I've struggled with it before. Or I know the importance of working with people in this type of, when this type of tension arises because I have that experience. Or I've been making pizzas at 14 different companies. I know how to make pizzas in a variety of different ways. So these career experiences affect both the individual attributes and the competencies. And we also have environmental influences, and those are things outside of the person and the person's own experiences that are acting in the environment, either co-workers, maybe they can be economic influences, they can be cultural trends, they can be customers in a neighborhood, they can be a set of employees that one supervises, but all those things influence the individual attributes, the competencies, and the leadership outcomes. And so the skills model says all of these factors work together to produce these outcomes. And so we need people with appropriate traits, but we need people especially with competencies, and we need to develop these competencies in people. So the skills approach is basically looking at, okay, what can we do to develop our leadership abilities and the leadership abilities of others? So one of the main strengths of the skills approach is that it's describing leadership in terms of skills. So this makes leadership available to everyone. People that learn and develop these skills can be leaders. It's also useful because it emphasizes the role of experience and environment. It's not just the leader's traits, but it's how those traits have interacted with the environment and past experiences and with past people, and what skills has the leader learned through all of this. And it also provides a nice framework for leadership education programs, whether it's an individual class on leadership or a whole master's degree or a major in leadership, because it says, aha, when you take a leadership class, you need to be developing skills, problem-solving skills, theory modeling skills, people skills. And so that's why, if you were to take a program in leadership, which many of you are, you would have classes in such things as creative problem solving, conflict resolution, teamwork, because these are all skills that need to be learned to be an effective leader. Now, there's also some criticisms of the skills approach. First of all, the theory is really broad, making it very general and not very precise. It applies pretty much to everybody, not just leaders. You can just for excelling in your job, it's a good model to describe things. And also another issue is that the difference between individual attributes, traits, and skills is not always very clear and is not as distinct as we would like them to be. For example, people that have greater cognitive abilities learn more quickly, so they will learn skills a lot quicker than people that aren't very smart. So the question is, should you hire for people that already have the skills, or should you try to hire just really smart people because you know they'll be able to learn the skills? And that's one of the most hotly debated topics in organizational psychology and leadership. Now, at Azusa Pacific, we're a Christian university, and so we like to reflect on what kind of biblical concepts is this related to. And I'd like to share with you a verse, Proverbs 18:15, that has a good link between the trait approach and the skills approach to leadership. It says, "Let the wise hear and increase in learning, and let the one who understands obtain guidance." So here on the one side, we've got traits, this being wise and being an understanding person, someone that wants to get information, who wants to understand things. And having those traits, if you use them, you put them into practice, will yield skills such as learning how to navigate life in general, or living what could be considered a guided and directed life, a life that God wants us to have, a life that's directed by Him. And that's the best type of life that we can possibly experience.